Hey Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How
Such an
are
honor
you?
to meet you last week.
Yeah, I've had a nice week.
So you've got an absolutely fascinating long history and current projects that you're doing. Can you just let us know a little bit how you decided to go into the Air Force in 1944, I believe?
1942.
42, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Okay. Yeah, well, I was studying to be a priest at the Salvatorian Seminary in Wisconsin.
noble.
Uh, and on the 7th of December, I was in my second year, and I was on the 7th of December, we heard that Pearl Harbor was bombed. And I came from a military family. My father and brothers were all serving, and uh, this was in 1941. My dad was a soldier of fortune, basically, and so I knew I had to go in. So I left the seminary. I was 17. I had just turned 17 on the 25th of November of 1941, and so I was about 12 days past my 17th birthday. And so, anyway, I finished the semester in about May, and then tried to join the Navy, and couldn't get in because of my eye problems. And then the Air Force was taking people who passed the competitive examination. So I took that, and anyway, I ended up joining the United States Army Air Corps on the 30th of November of 1942, 5 days after my 18th birthday, and started a pretty rigorous flying training program that eventually ended up on the 15th of April of 1945 when 19 years old, I was commissioned as second lieutenant fighter pilot.
So how much classroom training were you given before you started your first, I guess, co-piloting flight with an instructor?
Well, we had several things. First, we had a competitive, or not a competitive, but a evaluation, psychomotor and psychological, to see if you're fit for flying. And that, as a result of that, it was determined whether you're going to be a pilot, a navigator, or a bombardier. And I was selected for pilot training. And then after that, we went through a lot of ground school, being taught aeronautics and codes, Morse code, and things like that, and then also of various tactics that that were being used during the war. And then from there, we went through training. My flight training started on the in the October of 1943 at Dothan, Alabama, where I started flying the Stearman PT-17, a biplane, two wings, open cockpit, sort of thing. And I soloed in about 6 hours, and then finished that with about 65 hours. And then from
65
there,
hours. Wow. Today would be what, several hundred hours, I guess, before you
yeah.
got to.
From there, I went to basic training, which was a little heavy. We went through the BT-13, which was a metal aircraft. Didn't have retractable gear, but it was a closed cockpit, uh, more advanced aircraft. And I got about 85 hours in it, and then went to final training, which was advanced, where we flew the T-6 Texan. And this is where we got a lot of simulated combat training, and uh, it was about 50%. We had about a 50% failure rate going through. Only about half of us finished the course in my class, and uh, we are at the end of that we were commissioned and that was on the 15th of April of 1944.
I want to thank Colin Heaton from Heaton Lewis Books for supporting the show. Colin is an author, historian, and consultant to the TV and film industry and has amazing wartime historical film production projects in process. I also want to thank Kevin and Sam Sorbo from Sorbo Studios for supporting the show. Sorbo Studios is producing some amazing family friendly and faith based movies with Kevin and Sam's decades long experience in the industry. You can find out more at sorbostudios.com. What was some of the psychological tests that they gave to see if you were suitable to be a pilot, fighter pilot?
Well, one of the tests I remember well because I didn't know the purpose of it or what it proved. But anyway, they had like a 78 RPM record, the old Victrola type, the regular big record. And there was a little dot on it. And you held a little pen in your hand. And that thing went around the turntable. And you had to try to keep your pen on the top of that dot, and that was one of them. And then there's also psychiatrists would question you on all sorts of things. And one of them that really my lack of memory, they asked if you were ever unconscious, and I said no. I forgot all about the time. I was about 12 years old, and in a ice skating race, and somebody clipped the back of my skate, and I went up in the air and cracked my head, hit my head, and was out for about unconscious for about 20 minutes. And I just
20 minutes.
after it happened, I never even thought of it again. But fortunately, I did. Let's say I didn't. I was never unconscious, but I found out later that if you were unconscious for 1 minute, you would be washed out. So that was a fluke that allowed me to continue my training and finally end up a pilot. But it was about a 2 week affair where we would, in addition to we were doing all athletics during the same time, but we were being evaluated on various types of activities that we did, that sort of thing.
So I imagine the disc with the dot with the pen, was that to simulate you aiming and shooting at another plane? And if you can aim?
Well, that may have been one of the things. It may have been just coordination. I think we had to switch hands too. Yeah, first with right, and put the left or left if you're a lefty, right, so on.
So after you finished your basic training in, I guess, the States, right?
Oh yeah, I graduated from flight school in Napier Field, Dothan, Alabama, and received my wings there, and then from there, and then we got to leave, and then we got back, and then we checked out the P-40N, the Warhawk, same the type of aircraft, the Flying Tigers, with the sharp
P-40N, yeah.
Yeah, P-40N, and I got 10 hours in that. And in addition, we got some gunnery training. We went down to the Gulf, and we shot at a target. It was a big, long rag, that, and you'd come in and fire at that to check your aerial skills in firing. And then I went to Tallahassee, where we got a lot of ground school talking about. We had guest speakers who had been in combat in both the theaters in the Pacific and they would talk about the tactics and the experience, what we could expect if we're in those theaters. And we also had many lectures on venereal diseases, and they taught. I never knew there were so many. Anyway, and then how to prevent them, and then of course the only way to prevent them was abstinence. So that was a sort of a wake up to former seminarian. But anyway, from there I went down to Fort Myers, Florida, Page Field, and we were flying P-40s. In Florida, there were about 7 or 8 units, bases, and some of them, most of them flew P-51s. I think we were the only ones that had P-40s. But anyway, I got 240 hours in the P-40 and at Fort Myers, and then was on the 1st of November of 1944. I boarded the Ile-de-France, the French luxury liner that was converted to a troop ship, and we started off towards Scotland without the convoy because it was faster than the subs. Anyway, we get over to Scotland, and we get processed and assigned units, and I was assigned to the 20th Fighter Group, 55th Fighter or 20th Fighter Group at Kingscliff, England, which is about 90 near Peterburs, and it's about 90 miles north of London. And that was my combat unit. I arrived, and of course, the unit had the P-51s, and of course, the 7 of us that arrived, none of us had. We were all P-40 times, so we checked out the P-51. Got about 15 hours in it and started flying combat. I think I flew my first combat on the 12th of December of 1944.
So wait a minute, you had 50 hours or 15 hours to learn the P-51 Mustang.
Yeah.
That's not a lot.
Well, it was the P-40 was it was just a step up from the P-40. I mean, the P-40 was and all the characteristics. The thing is, the unit that we were assigned to, the 20th Fighter Group, had P-38s before I arrived, and they had just transitioned to P-51s about, I think it was in July or August that they had transitioned from P-38s to P-51s, and they were still having problems checking out in the P-51 when I arrived, and because the P-38 has counter-rotating props and there's no torque. I mean, but the P-51 and the P-40 had a lot of torque. The engine would pull you to the left, and you had to put in a lot of trim and this sort of stuff. You had to really watch it. And so it was much easier for us having P-40 time to check out in the 51 than it was for P-38 people to check out in the 51.
So I never thought about having to adjust torque like that, because I flew a little bit when the air cadets myself. I used to want to be a fighter pilot, but life took a different direction. But I guess I wasn't as powerful a plane that I could have felt the torque. All I did was really feel was the wind, because when you're flying a
Yeah.
small plane, it's was there much buffeting in the P-51?
Was there much what?
Buffeting in the wind?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It was a very, very smooth aircraft. I really enjoyed it. To give you an idea of the unit, our average age was 22 years old. Our group commander, full colonel, was 28 years old, commanding some thousands of men, flying lots of aircraft on combat missions. So that was the atmosphere. I was I was 19 and turned 20, and during my time there.
So the night before your first combat mission, how did you feel?
Oh, I felt excited. I was anxious to go. I was ready to go to war. And, you gave me a 2,000 horsepower engine aircraft, and with 650 caliber machine guns, 3 in each wing, and said, "Go do your job." And we were well trained on what the job was to be done.
And then when you're practicing firing on stationary targets on the ground, at what kind of range were you firing these 50 cals to get a
Oh,
good hit?
well, we'd start firing probably 100, a little over 100 yards out, and
That close?
oh yeah, 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 yeah. We right down it. You'll see many a combat film where you're going right through the debris. A lot of people were lost going through the debris. The engine would blow up, or ammunition car would blow up, and you were going right through. So it was down what I like to call grass cutting level. Right
Grass car.
down.
Expensive grass car. So what was your first mission and where did you take off from?
Well, we took off all of our missions. Well, not all, but most 90% of the missions we took off from Kings Cliff, from the airport there. And my first mission was really uneventful. It was escorting B-17s to targets. I believe it was in the Magdeburg area. It was about a 6-hour mission, and we didn't run into any. We had a lot of flak. That is a lot of ground fire at us, but it was uneventful.
So Kingscliff, that's the UK.
It was fun.
Was Kingscliff Airport in the UK?
Oh yes, yes.
Right.
Kingscliff was at about 90 miles north of London, just and just off the Wash in England. We'd be going out over the Wash and then across the Channel, and then
1943 to 1959. So this 6-hour mission, how many wingmen or how many P-51s were escorting? And did you know all the pilots there?
oh,
In your
it wasn't a very. I think it was only about 500 bombers or something like that, and we had
500, only
yeah,
500
probably
bombers.
a couple hundred P-51s. It wasn't a big. Many of the missions were well over 1,000 aircraft.
It's
I mean,
unbelievable.
well
This
over
is,
1,000 bombers and another 900 fighters.
I mean, today you hear about maybe, I don't know how many planes there did at the start of the Desert Storm. Maybe, I don't know how many planes there was, maybe 100 at the most. But it's on a different level. Plus, they had older technology and older manufacturing. The scale of
Yeah,
World War II is just unimaginable nowadays, I think.
yeah. Well, some of the missions was depending upon the weather conditions. You've seen the contrails that a heavy aircraft leaves at altitude. Well, it would be a clear day when we went out, and then when we came back, it was an overcast day, practically from the caused by the contrails, the vapor the bombers made. The whole sky was covered. You can see if you see one of the really big missions, like there was one mission we took off. I think we had 1,200 uh, uh, bombers and 950 some odd B-51s, and we were all grouped. We were going. They weren't all on one target. The whole force rendezvoused just about as you got near Magdeburg, and then the various groups would split off. Some would go to Magdeburg, some would go to Potsdam, some to Berlin, some to the other places. So the big force would change, and there were probably in each one of the smaller forces groups were some 400, 300, depending between two and 400 aircraft.
Hmm. I wonder how they managed to know your position so that they could coordinate you back at headquarters on the big physical map that they use. Maybe they had some kind of radar pulses or something.
No, we had no radar. We had the only thing we had was our I mean, you had radio between aircraft, but as
Mm.
far as navigation, there was no navigational equipment. I think there was a beacon we could use once, but most of it was dead reckoning. You had your map and you figured out what the wind was. You would just follow your map and
Mm.
your headings. You knew. I came back from one mission I lost my oxygen. Uh, I think it was over Czechoslovakia. Now it was a long mission. And I came back. Normally somebody comes back with you, but I went back by myself. And so I was navigating back. I had to be down below 10,000 feet because I had no oxygen. So I was coming back, and about halfway through Germany, I saw an airfield, and then I looked up and I saw four FW-190s. They were high, and they saw me, and I they started down at me. So what I did, I could have done two things. I could have turned into them and had a dogfight and got my butt shot off, or I could hide in the clouds. So I went up into the clouds at about 10,000 feet and was able to dead reckon it back to England. I made it back to England, okay, and landed. It's about a 6.5 hour mission all told.
So when was the first time you discovered met an enemy fighter in combat, and what did it feel like?
Uh, well, that was when was it? I think it was my 12th mission, sometime in early February. And this was one of the big forces. It had over 1,000 bombers, and we were headed towards targets in northern and western part of Germany, Berlin, Magdeburg, uh, uh, Potsdam, and all of those areas. And about the time we got to Magdeburg, we were hit by a couple of hundred 109s, and then the 109s came through the force, and their tactic was to send a 109 through and hit and run, try to hit a bomber and then run, hoping to draw the fighters, uh, uh, and which happened often, where the fighters would go start chasing the 109s and the bombers were left alone. And so, and then after the 109s came through, another 100 or so 190s, the radial engine aircraft, and they would stay and chew up the bombers. And to me, it was just this was my first encounter with the enemy, and the wings falling, parachutes falling, engines falling, and debris all over the sky, and also a lot of enemy fighters. And I was coming across, and I saw a 190, and we were coming head on, and we were firing at each other. My flight leader, he was on the tail of the 190, but I was coming head on at him with firing. So he didn't want to fire because he could have hit me. So uh, I saw some hits around the wing, and I passed under him at about probably 70, 50, 75 feet. And then as soon as I passed under him, my flight leader zapped him and he went down. So
Man,
that
sometimes
was
I
a
just wish they had better
really
cameras to
that was
record.
really an exhilarating experience, and it really made me realize how brave the bomber crews were. They were something, they would just go on. They're going 150, 160 miles an hour, and uh, have to stay, with the large, huge formations, and they can't duck. If the flak is coming, we were running all over the sky. We're too worried about the flak, and they would go through the flak, and then they were hit by a barrage of fighters, but they still went on to the target, and they would hit the target. I never saw any of them deter from their mission, and I thought they were the bravest of the brave. And I
Mhm.
wished that I was hoping that I could only be that brave or meet that kind of standard. But they had the really really bad time. With a fighter pilot, he doesn't see all the damage, but the bomber crews, they'd be hit, and half the crew would be blown apart. The ones that survived were bailing out. Some of them with limbs missing and things like that. And that's they really saw the grit and the horrors of what a war is, where fighter pilot really did have that experience.
Yeah, because people don't really think that realize that basically you're alone a lot of the time, and the people that you're fighting are not you're not with a bayonet, sticking it in someone's liver and seeing them
That's
scream.
right. Yeah.
You're just shooting these 50 cals. So in the combat, what kind of distance were you firing? When did you decide to fire on a enemy fighter? What range and what situations?
Well, the range. I really can't remember. It was I think around a couple of 100 yards, something like that.
That's close. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah. It's a couple of football fields, American football.
and would most of the shooting be done when you're either well, I guess most of it's going to be when the guys try to evade you, so you've got to
Yeah,
adjust. It's not you're not often going to get just a straight
yeah,
target to hit.
yeah. Well, the difference was, the dog fight was, I wouldn't say a rare, but it was more often than none. Uh, the kill was, you came up behind one and you zapped him, like
Mhm.
I did with Schuck. He was involved in blowing up B-17s, and I was able to get behind him without him noticing, and I zapped him. So I mean, there was no dog fighting involved, and besides that, a 262 and a P-51, you wouldn't dog fight the various characteristics of each aircraft wouldn't lend to a 262. If it was tried to dogfight, it'd have to slow down to get the maneuverability. The faster you go, the less maneuverable you are. So,
Oh, right.
yeah,
Because I played a lot of computer games as a kid where you're basically dogfighting a lot, but I never thought that because they're at different speeds, then there's not going to be much time where you can be shooting each other. I
yeah, yeah.
guess. Hmm. Guess that's a good thing and a bad thing because maybe it's less exciting for you,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It
but
was. It was a. It's a. Most of the kills of the 262 they were the 262 was vulnerable on takeoff, of course, and on landing. And if the P-51, or if the fighter, the adversary, the aircraft, had a speed advantage, which would be caused by altitude. Now, when I was going after Shook, uh, I think I was doing, well, I know I was doing 420 knots at 20,000 feet. And you convert to ground speed, there's 2% per thousand feet. So that's 40%. I was going 40% faster than my airspeed indicated at 20,000 feet as far as ground speed is concerned. And it was, so I was doing something close to 500,
Oh, I
550.
didn't know the Mustangs could go that fast.
Oh, well, yeah, yeah. You would hit the compressibility when you got up into the 500 sphere, and compressibility would cause uh, severe changes in your surfaces, control surfaces.
Is that the compressing of the sound waves?
Pardon?
Is that the compressibility of the sound waves when you're approaching speed of
Yeah,
sound? Right.
when you're approaching the sound, the speed of sound, you would your aircraft would eventually disintegrate if you kept pushing it. And we had a couple of guys in the unit that in dives they did hit compressibility and they were killed.
If that wasn't a factor, could the Mustang hit the speed of sound?
No,
Right.
the Mustang would. In fact, I had the story of a 262 pilot who was I was on this mission, and he uh, was being chased by some 51s, and he went down full, down to the deck. And when he got down to about 100, 500 feet, he started losing control of his controlled surfaces were acting up, and he hit compressibility, but he was able to bring the speed back and survive it. But he makes a good narration of what he went through and that.
So these 262s there were jet engines. I was under the impression that there wasn't many jet engines, German planes in the war, but you seem to have encountered a few of them.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was back the day. I think the day I was shot down on the 10th of April, where Schuck was involved, I think there were 50 some odd, 55 or 60 262 shot down or destroyed. Not shot down, but destroyed.
Hmm. And what was the name of the guy that you shot down and you eventually became friends
Walter
with?
Schuck, Walter Schuck,
Walter Schuck.
over Lieutenant Walter Schuck, Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with Palm, 500 missions, and destroyed 198 aircraft with the ME 109, and 8 aircraft with the 262.
The ME 109, yeah, the one probably the most famous German fighter.
Yeah, what he was one of the top with 206 kills. I saw
Ace.
him shot
You shot
down.
down
I saw him shoot down two B-17s in a
so
row. So
you shot down one of the best fighter aces in World War Two.
yeah.
That's quite a good bragging rights. I've going to a club. Yeah, I shot down the one of the best fighters in the world. You
Well,
know,
the thing is, I didn't even know that the damage I did. I hit him, and I saw smoke coming off of his left engine and some flame, and he went down to the deck, and at 3,000 about 3,000 feet, he disappeared into some clouds, and of course I was chasing him all the way, and of course he was pulling away from me as we were going down. And so he went into the cloud bank, and then I wasn't going to follow him in there. And so I look over, I see an airfield full of aircraft. So I decided to start strafing it. And Walter tells me later, when we get together and all that, 60 some odd years later, that when he went into the cloud back, he thought I was going to follow him, so he started making a 90-degree turn, and as he was turning, the engine just disintegrated, and he had to bail out. So that was, it was not until it was 1996 1997, about 2000, the year, yeah, around the between 1998 and 2000, that I discovered that that I possibly shot down a Walter Schuck. And by the time, and all the German researchers and the Norwegian and all the European researchers were really going after it, because they all wanted to. For years they had been trying to find out who shot down Walter Schuck. And they finally came to the conclusion that was positively no mistake, that I shot down Walter Schuck. Because,
How did you actually even go about researching something as complicated as that? I mean,
well, yeah,
just
the thing that started it all was back in I think it was 1996, 1997, that I got a letter from Germany, from a uh, golly, oh, I can't remember his name. He was anyway. Come on, oh boy. Anyway, he sent me a letter. Said he was a 13-year-old boy hiding in a ditch at Berg, Germany, and he saw all that happened when I was shot, when I bailed out over Berg, and landed and captured and interrogated. And he saw where the airplane landed, crashed. And that Berg, of course, was in East Germany. And and then when reunification took place, a lot of the East German TV stations started doing uh, documentaries on recovering aircraft. Well, he talked the men to doing a search for my aircraft, saying he knew where exactly what. Well, anyway, they found it, and for 18 months he was trying to find a pilot of that aircraft. And after 18 months, my name, it was the name that came up, and then he sent me a letter asking me if he had that. Excuse me. And he asked me if that was my. I said, yeah, well, everything sounds the same. I'm sure that it was my aircraft, and it was verified later by the serial number and this sort of thing.
I'm amazed that that field of 50 something years, they could have found it under all that,
Yeah,
changing
well, it
earth
was
and stuff.
deep. It was deep. I've got pictures of them doing with the backhoe, and it was good 10 feet down before they started pulling out pieces. I got one with they're pulling up the prop and that sort of stuff. But anyway, after several letters back and forth, I get a call from the TV producer there in Germany, in Berg, and he's asking if I could come to Germany to do another a follow-on documentary on uh, here's the pilot that followed through the aircraft stuff. And I said no. My wife had just had a stroke, so I was her sole caregiver. So I said no, I couldn't come there. And so he said, well, how about us coming to Colorado Springs? That's where I was living. And I said, yeah. So anyway, arrangements were made for him to come, and Walter, not Walter, Werner Dietrich. He's the 13-year-old boy. Of course, he's in his 70s now. I mean, he was in his 70s back then. So he and the crew all came to Colorado Springs and brought me parts of my aircraft, and uh, we spent some time together. Well, Werner thought that I was part of the group uh, that was bombing Magdeburg. And when I told him the story about, no, I was on the raid on Oranienburg, and that I encountered this ME-262, and I got some hits on his engine, and he disappeared and so on. And when they left Colorado Springs, Werner said, "I'm going to find that 262 pilot." And I said, "Well, yeah, good luck." So anyway, about 2 months later, I get a letter. He didn't have computers, so it was all snail mail back and forth. 10 days to get there and 10 days to get back and all that. But anyway, he comes back. He says, "Eureka! I found him. It's Walter Schuck, top base and all that sort of stuff." I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Everything matches." I said, "Well, yeah, I'll take 50% a chance that it's true because of the fog of war and everything. It has to be more than that."
Mm-hmm.
So I left it at that until I think it was 2002. Christer Bergstrom, who was a prolific Swedish writer on the war between the air wars over Europe during World War II. He sent me an email and asked. He said, I understand that you wrote a narration of your shoot down of a 262 back in uh, just after the war, after you returned in the States." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Would you mind sending me that?" And I said, "Yeah." And Krister was writing Walter Schuck's biography. That's why he was so interested, and he had been trying to find, who shot him down all this time. So anyway, I sent him the email, and about 3 days later, he says, "100% sure you shot him down." I said, "Well, how can you?" He says, "All your the timing and everything is perfect." He says, "Everything is exactly on the dot." I said, "Well, that's still maybe a 98% chance, but I still it can't be positive." He says, "Yes, it can, because Walter Schuck is the only uh, 262 pilot that shot down two B-17s in a row on that mission, and you saw him shoot down." He said, "In fact, shot down four. He shot down two before he went into your box, and then you saw him shoot down the next two, and it has to be you." He says, "You in your narration say you saw him shoot this 262, shoot him down, and explained how he shot him down exactly." He says that it has to be you. I said, "Okay, great."
And how did you
So,
manage to shoot him down? Because that's a faster plane than yours.
well, see, I was flying high cover. Actually, we were in this big 1,200 so 900 so fighters, and the bombers were splitting up. Well, my group was escorting uh, some 450 plus B-17s from the first uh, uh, air division, and we had some I think 300 or so fighters with that group. And our particular box of bombers was flying about 23,000, and I was up flying high cover at about 28,000. And just as we got to the target, and the bombers let go with their loads, we were hit by a whole swarm of ME 262s. And it was Walter Schuck's group that hit us. There were seven 262s, and I saw this. I saw this 162, and I immediately latched onto it with my eyeballs, and I'm looking, and and I'm rolling over down at him, and he's pulling up behind the 17, and he blows him, and then he moves over to another B-17, and by that time I've got throttle full open. I'm going like hell. I'm pulling into his 6 o'clock position, and then simultaneously I start firing, and he blows up the 262. I mean the B-17, and I see some hits in his left wing and engine, and there's some smoke and fire, and he just does a rolling turn over to the right and I start down after him, and of course as he's going down, I'm losing my speed advantage caused as a result of the altitude advantage I had. And when he gets out to about 3,000 feet, he disappears into the clouds. And I don't
Oh,
follow
so
him.
he was in a, what was he flying again?
What was he? What?
Walter. What
He
plane
was
was he
flying
flying?
an ME-262.
262. Yeah, right. Yeah, that explains the speed. Yeah. Wow. And so that's some good aiming. It's, I guess you were sort of aiming in front of him, or like, or we just shoot straight at him, or you had to sort of imagine where
No,
he would be.
he's concentrating on shooting down the B-17,
Hmm.
and I'm coming down like this, and he's there, and about the time I get here, he blows up the 17, and I'm getting hits in this thing, and then he rolls over and starts down towards Berlin, and I'm following him down.
Hmm. Fascinating. And the trigger for the gun, is it on the yoke?
Oh, on my gun?
Yeah.
No, it's a we don't have a yoke in a 51. It's a
Right.
stick,
Is this,
and
you have
it
a
has
stick?
a pistol grip on it,
Right.
and
Right.
you have a little trigger, and that's that's how you fire.
Does it have like a safety, or you just like, you must have a safety, right? Because you don't
Oh
want that
yeah,
thing going
it's
off.
got a safety.
Yeah.
It has a red safety lid over the trigger, and you pop it up.
And how many rounds in each gun did you have?
Oh golly, I can't remember. Just hundreds.
Hundreds. And so did all the six always fire at the same time?
Yes, they'd all
Mm.
fire, and you had a camera also mounted in the wing that photographed what you were. I mean, it was a movie camera, a
Mm.
16 millimeter movie camera, and it would, uh, take a picture of what you're doing.
And why was
That's
there
how.
cameras in these planes? Because that space could be used for more ammo or something like that.
What?
Why was there cameras in all these planes?
Oh, to show what damage you did.
Right, right,
I mean, you go and you want to you destroy a locomotive, and the camera takes a picture of the
right,
locomotive
right,
blowing up. Well, you blew up. And the same thing with shooting down an aircraft. I mean, you're coming, and it shows you it's coming into the tail of that aircraft.
hmm.
I'm sure my camera had the whole situation with Schuck, and
And
but of course my camera was 10 feet under.
where are these films? Are these something that we can see, or what? Are they
Oh yeah,
lost?
yeah. I've got. I have my gun camera film from Vietnam. I mean, from Korea. From Korea.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting one because it was all ground support.
Can we get this film of you shooting Walter down for the podcast? Is that something that we
Oh
can
no,
share?
no, there is none
Oh, there
because
is, right.
my aircraft was destroyed and the camera along with it.
Oh, right,
My
yeah.
guns, I have got pictures of my guns that they retrieved, and they're just like pretzels. they're, they're just completely destroyed. I was doing probably a couple hundred miles an hour when I hit the ground. I mean, when the aircraft hit the ground.
So, Joe, can you tell me a little bit how you managed to get shut down and what it was like as a POW?
Well, yeah, as I told you before, after Walter disappeared into the clouds, looked over and I saw this airfield just loaded with German aircraft. So I decided to go. Actually, I was with my flight leader, Captain Tracy. He had followed me down while I was fought, so we were together. So we went into to the uh, to the airfield. We got down real low, cut grass level, 50 feet, and wide open throttles, and because we wanted surprise, and we were able to get it. We made our first pass, and we each got one. Each one got one aircraft, and came around for the second pass, and uh, Tracy got two more, and I got one, and then I concentrated on a gun tower, a flak tower, and was shooting it up. And then we come around for the third pass, and Tracy gets two more, so he got a total of four that he destroyed, and I get one. Uh, and
Fighter planes.
yeah, these are bombers,
Bomb.
fighters. It's an airfield just loaded. It's a big on a great big grassed area, and they're dispersed all around, and you're just like shooting, yeah, shooting
Shooting cats in the barrel.
cats. And so as he's coming off of his third pass, he gets a 20 millimeter up through the rear of the aircraft and up through the cockpit. And later I find out that it burnt the seam in his pants as his flying suit as it went out. But anyway, he was low, and about three, and I saw it was a matter of seconds. I saw the hit, the smoke, and I saw the canopy go, and then I saw him go out about 300 feet. He landed in a river that was adjacent to the airfield, uh, Schoenwalde. And so I continued to make passes by myself. And I made another pass, and I got another aircraft and started a hangar on fire. So I had four then, and then I saw this FW 200, which is the Condor, a big four-engine aircraft that was part of Hitler's fleet. That and so I come around, and as I'm coming in on it, the I felt a thud, and I fired, and I blew up the Condor. And as I was coming off, I felt another thud, and then I started getting oil over the windscreen.
Not a good sign when you're flying at 500, 400 miles an hour.
I'm flying well over 450, close to, and I'm coming up, so I was able to make it up to 10,000 feet. And with the manipulation of throttle and prop control and mixture and all those, I can't even remember the sequence of it, but I was able to keep the engine running a little bit. But I had to make the decision whether to go east towards the Germans, and this is right in the Berlin area, so and east towards the Russians, or west. We were briefed that Allied forces were fighting in Magdeburg, so I did, and that was about 90 miles, 80, 90 miles away. So I decided to go west and try to make it back to over the lines at Magdeburg. So anyway, as I'm coming back, I'm losing altitude slowly all along, and by the time I get to Magdeburg, I'm down to 1,000 feet. And I figured, well, I'm not going to make. I'm going to have to bail out. My engine burning. So I unstrap everything. I'm strapped, ready to bail. And then I look over to my right. I see an FW 190 coming at me. So it's 3 o'clock coming right. And so I turned, I'm able to maneuver my aircraft, turn into him. And as I'm turning into him, he fires and he misses, fortunately, and goes flying by. And he had both guns and rockets. So he fired both. Fortunately, he missed, of course. And then I looked down at about 500 feet and I said, hell, I'm too low to bail out. I'm going to have to belly this in. Now, this is all taking place in milliseconds, and I'm going to have to, oh, hell, I'm unstrapped. I'll kill myself bellying in because I'm not strapped. I have no shoulder harness, no belt, seat belt.
Sheesh.
So I'm going to have to go out the side. Well, you're supposed to go out the right side, which if you go out the right side, the torque of the engine will throw you off to the right. If you go out the left side, it'll throw you into the aircraft. But anyway, I'm about 350 feet. I'm off on the wing, and I let go, and I hit my knee with on the horizontal stabilizer. I pulled a ripcord. I swing once and hit the ground hard.
Did you get
So I,
any?
pardon?
Did it slow your? Did it slow your fall? The parachute?
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I would, the parachute worked perfectly. It popped, and that slowed me down. And then I swung once, and then the second swing
Oh,
kind of
right, right, right.
I hit the ground.
The guy's
And
probably wondering why you bailed out on him without him hitting you.
so I had to look at the situation. I had burns on my leg from the fire in the aircraft and on my arms, but I was, okay. And so I stand up and I'm in the middle of a field, hundreds of acres all around me, just, the town buildings about maybe a couple hundred yards away, but absolutely no escape. And there's about 10 farmers coming running at me with their pitchforks and all this sort of stuff. And about the time they're about 10, 15 yards from me, they roar. I hear a roar, and here's this motorcycle pulls up with a Luftwaffe sergeant on it. And he pulls out his Luger and fires a shot in the air and stops the civilians.
So
And
do you think the civilians would have killed you?
they were going to do me in. Yeah,
Really?
oh yeah, absolutely. There was no on that day. There were this is a side thing, but uh, Sergeant Lewis, who was one of the B-17 pilots, uh, he and two others bailed out and made it, and you made a safe landing. But two of them were killed by the civilians.
Really? I never heard of that before. Civilians killing.
That's what happened and was happening. But then, almost simultaneously, a bunch of town people, not town people, but town officials like the Burgermeister and the chief of police and several others were out there. They sergeant and they started talking. What they wanted to do is take me into town and interrogate me, which they did. The sergeant agreed. So we go into the building, and immediately the police chief, who was probably old guy, about 45 years old. To me, I'm 20. So, and he's got an artificial right hand, black leather, and I figured that he must be a World War One, lost his hand in World War One or something. Just anyway, he takes out
These Nazis saved your life, basically.
yeah, the sergeant did. Yeah, the Luftwaffe sergeant. But the police chief, he takes out his Luger and puts it to my head and wants to blow me here on the spot. And the Luftwaffe sergeant, none of that. He pulls his Luger out, and it was a sort of a standoff. And then the sergeant says, there's a big crowd gathering outside, yelling and screaming and stuff like
Wait a minute.
that.
This Nazi officer threatened the policeman who was going to shoot you.
Yeah. The sergeant saved me.
Amazing.
Yeah. So he says, we're leaving, and he takes me out, puts me on the motorcycle, and off we go to the airfield at Berg, which was a experimental aircraft. They did a lot of new things for new aircraft and stuff like that. And he was telling me, as one was, he says, the reason they're so I could speak a little German, he could speak a little English, and wasn't this clear. But he let me know that the reason they were so ticked off as a 3-year-old, a couple of days before, a group of P-51s strafed the area, and the little 3-year-old girl was blown apart.
Sheesh.
And that's why they were. And for all I know, could have been some relation to the police chief. You don't want to.
So that a girl was on the runway or something like that, or why they were just shooting up houses or something? Do they know why they were shooting it?
I have no idea what the circumstances, or if it was true, or if it was just a bunch of bull crap, or what.
I mean, the Germans were bombing London, so I guess this is fog of war and Bob.
So anyway, we get to the airfield at Berg, and they put me in the local jail, the airport jail, and get interrogated for about 3 days by Gestapo. Nothing serious, just intense interrogation, which I just name, rank, and serial number. So they didn't get any place what they knew they weren't. But each one of these nights, we were bombed by the RAF. So I had to go to I went into the bomb shelter. They brought me into the bomb shelter with all the Germans. I'm sitting there while the RAF is bombing the hell out of them. And I'm sitting there with all these Germans. They're just looking at me with full of hate. So that went on for 3 nights. And then they decided to ship me off to and I was talking to the guy that ran the jail there that I was in, and he was telling me about all the experimental aircraft they were working on and stuff like that. The new and his main concern was that I'd leave him a note saying that he treated me well. He knew the war was over. Yeah, this is the 10th of April, 1945, and so I left him a note. And because he did, he was a good guy. And I thought, everything Anyway, I get to the train station and I'm standing there waiting to be put on a boxcar to go to Stalag 11, which was, probably 20 miles away. It wasn't a long distance. But, and I'm standing there, one of the railroad guys came up to me and he said, do you know that your president died? No, that was the first I heard. This was the 12th of April. And this was what he was telling me was about the 13th of April. So, he said, yeah, he died on the 12th of April. And he said, you want a schnapps? And I said, yeah. Yeah, I got a nice shot of schnapps and wow, it was something else. Anyway, I get on the boxcar and then end up at Stalag 11. Well, Stalag 11 was a British POW camp, and they had already evacuated. They were going, of course, east as the troops were coming towards it. As I said earlier, we were fighting in Magdeburg, so they had evacuated this camp. There's only about 100 POWs still there. They were British Tommies, and we were put on. And I spent the night there, and the next morning we all, the 100 of us, or 100 or so, and myself, we started on a march back to towards Berlin. And it was pandemonium. It was thousands of refugees going east and thousands going west, and the army trying to get through, the army trucks and tanks and whatever, and army motorcycles running up and down trying to keep some order. And we were strafed every day by Allied fighters. So that went on for about 6 or 7 days until we got to Luckenwalde. And Luckenwalde is just outside of Berlin, and probably 20 miles from Hitler's bunker. And when I get in there, lo and behold, there's Tracy. He was picked up at the airfield after he got out of the lake. Out of the river. He was shipped off to Tempelhof, and then from Tempelhof he went, and he was sent to. So he had been out there for about 10, 11 days before I got there. And there were there was Lieutenant Stewart from the 79th Squadron that was also shot down, and he was there. And then there were two sergeants, Sergeant Krupp, who could speak fluent Russian, and Sergeant Lewis, and both of them were toggleiers on the bombers, the guys that released the bombs on the B-17s, and both of those were shot down. They were on the same mission. So those four were already at the camp, and they had planned on escaping when I got there, and spent probably 2 days before we decided to go. And escaping was, the security was really lax. Half the guards had taken off, and because the Russians were coming towards them, and So it was basically just going under the fun, avoiding the few guards that were left, and going under the fence. So we get out and we go down by a side road, and we walk. We probably 7, 8 miles, something like that, walking towards Berlin, and then we came across this tank unit column that was coming out of Berlin and heading for Wittenberg. So Sergeant Krupp, we were in a ditch, hiding in the ditch, and Sergeant Krupp goes out and waves them down, and he's able to communicate with them, tell them what the situation is, and he said, "Yeah, come on, we'll come along with us. We're going towards Wittenberg." I said, "Okay." So we all joined the convoy and started going. The first town we came to where we had a skirmish was at Jitterbug, and at Jitterbug, I went on a patrol with a Russian sergeant, and we came to this something to.
How did you escape from the POW camp to the Russians?
Oh, okay. There was Stewart, Tracy, Krupp, and hmm, Lewis. And I arrived at the POW camp, and they had already planned an escape. And so escape was not that difficult. A lot of the security had left, so it was just going under the fence at night and avoiding the security that was there. So we started walking towards Berlin and got to about 5, 6 miles down the road. Sergeant Group came out and we saw a tank unit coming towards us, and we Sergeant Krupp, who could speak Russian, went out and checked with the lieutenant, and he said, "Fine." He told him our situation. He said, "Join us, and we'll take you along with us." And so we agreed to that, and we joined the column and started headed towards Wittenberg. But the first stop on the way, or the first engagement we had on the way, was fighting in the Jitterbug. And during the fight, I went on a patrol with a Russian sergeant and a patrol of Russians, and we came across this apartment complex that was really nice, and the Russians were destroying everything in sight. And we went into the building and came across this. We were in this room, and the sergeant says, "You guys stand aside." He gets in the middle of the room with his burp gun and stands there, going in a circle, just burping, just destroying everything in sight. And I thought at that time, what have I got myself into? These guys are.
So this is basically scorched earth revenge
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
what the Germans did to Barbarossa to scorched earth
Absolutely,
policy.
absolutely.
Horrible, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
just,
So in any event, we from there we went on towards Wittenberg. Had a couple of little skirmishes, nothing to speak of. I fired my gun a couple of times. That was about it. But in any event, when we did, we ended up at no, I forgot a major part of the story. I
it all sounds major to me, mate. Every single step of this story sounds major to me.
after after a couple of days, we were sort of separated throughout the column, the five of us. I was by myself, and the others were generally together. And after a couple of days, I noticed that none of the other guys were around. I started trying to communicate with the Russians, saying, "Where the hell are they? What's going on?" Either because they didn't understand or they didn't want to let me know or whatever. Anyway, I just discarded it and just kept on with them and finished the tour. I mean, the column until we got to. I was with the column until we got to Wittenberg, Anyway, I'll interject about the separation. 60 some odd years later, I was told by Lewis, I said, an American general came across and met with the column in a helicopter. And he brought all of us, the four of us, back, and we were able to return to our units.
No way.
Now, they left me behind. I have no idea what the hell. I'm the only guy alive, so there's nobody alive anymore that could tell me all the details of it, or what, why, or where. I don't know if they did tell the Russians, the general, that I was there, or if it was some kind of a deal between the Russians. They'd leave one there and take the rest along, or I have no idea. But anyway, I was left behind.
Well, you got a unique experience that they didn't have after, so.
So anyway, that's just the backstory. So anyway, we get to Wittenberg, and I'm in sort of standing, and they were starting to get, Potsdam was going on, the conference in Potsdam, and things were getting a little tight between the East and the West. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not, but they were taking, pretty close watch on me. And we're at Wittenberg, and the United States Army patrol comes across the Elbe and meets the lieutenant there, and the sergeant in charge of the American patrol. He sees this flight suit back in the background. I was probably 25, 30 yards away, sort of by the trees and stuff, and he sees that it's a flight suit. And they wouldn't let me. I don't know how it, but I was unable to go and talk to the American patrol.
Oh, really?
So after the sergeant sees me, he starts discussing it with the lieutenant, and after seemed like some few harsh words, they said okay, and
Allies,
yeah, yeah. So they let me go, and the sergeant said he's going back with us, so I went back with them. So anyway, that was my end of the time with the Russians, and which I have many little stories to go along with that. But it was really a really rewarding and interesting experience that I had with them. From fixing a guy's bike to a really big a feast of drinking and debauchery and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I go with the U.S. Army patrol back to Halle. They were stationed. Their unit was stationed at Halle, which had been a big Luftwaffe base, and so I'm hanging out with them and go on a couple of patrols with them, and I don't think of this stuff until 60, 70 years later. I'm thinking, well, not too long ago, I said, well, how in the hell come no officer or anybody was interested who in the hell this guy is? After I got back, and so anyway, I hang out with the patrol, play poker, and get a little drunk with them and stuff. And after about 3 or 4 days, I get tired of that, and I say, "Hey, I'm taking off." So I just take off and start heading west. I get down about 7 miles away from Holly, and I'm see this C-47 cargo plane parked in this field, and there were two lieutenants, the pilots, and a group of about 12, 13 people dressed in political uniform, the striped suits, the concentration type of garb. And I go over to the lieutenant. I said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Well, these are some political prisoners that they were taken back to Paris." with us, and and I said, well, if Paris, that sounds good. He said, how about a ride back? He said, sure. So I hop on the C-47, and these guys were really emaciated. They barely spoke.
These Germans.
Pardon?
These were
I think
German.
they were French. They were French. Uh,
Okay.
they may have been French Jews, for all I know. But they were really bad off. And anyway, we get to Paris, and that was a big mistake because I get off the plane and immediately get grabbed and uh, stamped as returned to duty and deloused with the DDT in a big shower sprayed with DDT up all over and all that. And then I get a uniform. My flying suit was getting a little ripe by that time. Uh, and so anyway, I get and then sent down to a POW redistribution camp. It was called Camp Lucky Strike. They had several of them in the Le Havre area. Some were called, they were named by cigarettes, Camp Campbell, Camp Lucky Strike, Camp Chesterfield, stuff like that. Smoking was a big thing in those days.
That's my
But
granddad used to tell me.
so anyway, I get there, and then after, well, I bump into a good friend of mine, Bill McGee, who had been shot down. No, he wasn't shot down. He tried to land his P-51 to save Captain Ford, who had had to land in a field, and McGee landed his 51, and they both got stuck. So they were
Oh
both,
dear,
you
yeah.
know,
Never leave a man behind, but then you both get left
yeah.
behind. To tricky
So
ethical dilemma, that one.
yeah. So anyway, he and I decided, hell, we're going to go back to our units. So we go AWOL from the absent without leave from the distribution Camp Lucky Strike. We go down to Le Havre, and we at the airfield there. We bump into a B-17 that was going back to London. So we hopped a ride with them, and then from London took the tube up to King's Cliff, and reunited with our group for a short period of time. But after 3 days, they said you can't stay here because you're official POW. And you can't return to your unit. So I got a good examination from the flight surgeon and been able to talk, but with the guys. But strangely, I didn't have any contact with. I don't know if they weren't there when we were there, or they were on leave or something. But anyway, Tracy or Stuart, I never had any contact with them there. But I went ahead and after 3 days, then McGee and I went back to London and eventually found a ride back to Le Havre, and we're coming back into the Lucky Strike and just passed through the gates, and a Jeep with a couple of MPs come running up and says, "Are you Peterburs?" I said, "Yeah." He says, your ship, your convoy has already started to leave." He said, "Hop in." And I hopped in, and all my nice souvenirs are back in my tent. And and so
Oh
anyway,
no.
they take me down to the port. The ship had already departed. So they throw me in a speedboat and take me out to the to the boat, and I climb up the side with a rope ladder and end up in the ship, and end up anyway. A long story short, I end up in uh, New York on the 1st of June, and then back in Port Sheridan at about the 4th or 5th of June. And then after a couple of days of administrative stuff, I'm home on leave at about the 11th or 12th no, 11th of June, I think, and then make arrangements immediately to marry my fiancee, Josephine, who I had named my aircraft after.
Lovely.
And then I found out that I had to get my mom's permission to get married because I hadn't turned 21 yet.
What a time.
And we got married on the 13th of June, 1945, and had 60 beautiful years together before she passed.
60 years. Congratulations. Cool. Well, I think that's a great place to end this first part, but definitely need to do another podcast to get more, maybe some questions on some of this story once I process it, and then maybe talk about your other wars of it in the Army Korea.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for your time, Joe. Really appreciate it.
Where will I be able to see the podcast?
It will probably take about 2 or 3 weeks before I get finished editing because I've got other things to edit. Yeah.
But where does it appear?
It goes on YouTube. It goes on YouTube. It goes on iTunes. It goes on all the different main podcast platforms. So you can either watch it or you can just listen to it. Whatever.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks for.
Great. Well, it's been my pleasure. It's really been nice to have a nice little discussion.
And I'm really honoured that you had a chance to talk to I guess one of the few World War II veterans still alive. So, and you're in great shape. You sound fresh. And you look healthy. So, may many more ears hear what you have to say in the future, and may movies be made from it, and may you be in the movies as well. You deserve it. You deserve it, man. So great. Well, see you next time, and thanks everyone else.
Good. Okay, thank you. Right. Okay, I'm signing off now.
Okay. And thanks everyone that's watched the show as well. See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Nikos Show. I trust you enjoyed its content and were transported on an adventure. If you are a world-class expert in your field, or you know one, please get in touch. I'm also looking for long-term partners to sponsor the show. Please share with your friends if you like this episode, and please leave a rating and leave a review if you haven't done already. See you again soon. Nikos out. Bye-bye.